to take that risk to have their voice heard.
And of course, perhaps the authorities are holding their breath. It is Friday, a day of rest across the Muslim world, wondering what might be said in mosques, certainly across not just the region, but mainly in Bahrain as well.
Yes, well, Friday prayers are just getting underway in Bahrain right now, and I think they will be watching that. They'll be watching what happens in mosques across the island. One focus will be a place called Draz, a large village, which is a place where the best-known Shia cleric, Ayatollah Isa Qasim, will be giving the address. He has been critical of the government many times before, back in the 1970s, back in the 1990s, when there were clashes in this country. So I think his words will be listened to. And then I think what the authorities will be watching is whether the crowds that have gathered to pray then decide to go on another demonstration or another march. At the moment, though, I have to say, everywhere where I've seen crowds at these funeral marches, there have been no police or security forces anywhere in sight. I think they have decided to let the people grieve in peace, and I think they're also watching and listening to the words coming from around the world, from world leaders, and particularly the United States, who have condemned the violence on this island.
And also, of course, there'll be a great deal of perhaps reflection as well as to where protesters, if they want to, go next, do next.
And I think there's disagreement among the protesters about what they do next and how they proceed with this, because they know that the official position now from the government here is that for now demonstrations are banned. They are not allowed. So any demonstration that they take part in could be put down by the security forces. I think there's a big dilemma, though, for the government and for the ruling family here. They're getting this international pressure on them, which means that they are very reluctant to use force. But if they don't use force, then the crowds continue to gather, and as we saw earlier in the week, the crowds get larger and larger, thousands upon thousands of people gathering, and some of the demands of those crowds are a removal of the government, some even arguing for a removal of the royal family and the king. So I think the government want to stop those sort of protests, which I think they fear could spiral and be impossible to stop.
Well, for the moment, we know that you're following events for us there in Bahrain. Thank you. Well, crowds are gathering in Cairo's Liberation Square to celebrate the end of Hosni Mubarak's 30-year rule. It's been a week since Mubarak was forced out of office by an unprecedented wave of protests. Several hundred military police in red berets are keeping watch over the square. Meanwhile, Egyptian authorities have arrested 3 former government ministers and a businessman suspected of corruption. Our correspondent Hoda Abdelhamid joins me now live from the square. Just bring us up to speed on who's been arrested, Hoda.
Well, the ousted Interior Minister, Habib al-Adli, a housing minister, and then a tourism minister, and then Ahmed Aziz, who is a businessman who was also part of the steering committee of the ruling NDP party and who was renowned for being very, very close to the son of Hosni Mubarak, Gamal Mubarak. Now, they had been put under investigation shortly after the violence that had gripped the streets of Cairo, shortly after the clashes between the pro-Mubarak protesters and the pro-democracy campaigners. At the time, it was hinted that they had a role in what happened and maybe organizing the violence that happened, or as Egyptians see it, the thuggery that happened. Now, they had been questioned several times by the general prosecutor over the past 2 weeks, and it's last night that they had been put under arrest for 15 days pending investigation.
Of course, today we can see those pictures there in Liberation Square. Many people there to remember the dead, but also to make sure they remind the authorities what they want. And are they any clearer about what they want, Hoda?
Well, I think there's a bit of confusion. At the moment, there is a huge satisfaction, and today is actually called the day of victory. With what happened, you would have now opinions a bit split on the role of the military. Many do put the military, or do trust the military rather, but also there are some people who are saying that maybe the military is not acting with enough transparency. Yes, it does issue its communiques, it does state what are the next steps, but you would have some people who would complain that maybe the military is not involving too many people of the opposition, is not really deliberating with too many different parties before it reaches its conclusion. Now, I have to tell you that today the military is making sure it's part of the celebrations. About an hour ago, a military band came into the square. It's still there. It's been playing the national anthem and other patriotic songs. You also will see military police distributing flags to the people. I saw a lot of people hugging soldiers, kissing soldiers. So at the moment, certainly here on the square, there is a unity between the people and the military. But there's also a bit of worry, because you have to remember that in 1952, it was the free officers who did the revolution. And at the time, it was said that the rule would go from a military to a civilian within 2 years. That never happened. And so you do have campaigners here, pro-democracy campaigners, who want to make sure that that won't happen again.
Well, that's for the moment. Of course, Hadi, you'll be following events for us throughout the day. Thanks very much for joining us. Well, just to move this on forward, I'm joined now by Thomas Gougoussian, an Egyptian journalist and writer. He works for an Egyptian online daily, Dastur. Thanks for joining us. You've been watching events for the past few weeks with us here on Al-Jazeera. You've been analysing them for us as well. The pictures you see there, many people gathered in Liberation Square, obviously there to remember the dead. But what are their demands now?
As we said, it's to remember and to remind. To remember those who died or injured or suffered from what happened in the last 3 weeks. In the same time, to remind the people who were there, the millions, that the revolution is on. I mean, which means that nothing is changed completely, or there are some changes, as we reported from Cairo, and saying that there is this higher council of military forces, which is taking care of Egypt for transitional period till 6 months, and they just appointed a group of people, of lawyers and judges, to make some changes in the constitution. But yet the people are eager to know more about what's next. I mean, is going to be presidential, parliamentary government or presidential government? In the same time, what type of participation will take place as a technocrat? And always, people are tossing their names of people who are in their 70s or late 60s. This is really a reflection of what happened in January 25th? Of course, there is a lot of demands. The immediate demands, as a matter of fact, in the last few days, which is like, as we see, the council, the military council, or the transitional governing body, it's like issuing communiques or speaking through spokesperson. But are they really communicating with people or not? That's still, it's a big issue.
But they seem to be communicating the right bits of information as far as some observers see. For example, they're giving 10 days for this council of wise men to offer suggestions of how to